Governor Cuomo wrapping up that daily briefing. Meanwhile, I just want to show you the scene here. The USNS Comfort. This is the third ambulance that we've seen pull up to this naval ship in the past hour and a half or so. We heard Governor Cuomo talk about this hospital, saying that capacity here. We've been reporting that bed capacity, usually on this ship, 1,000 beds. Because it is now being retrofitted, if you will, to take care of COVID-19 patients, 500 beds now. It's a 500-bed capacity ship. We also heard from Governor Cuomo there that New York yesterday saw its largest single-day increase in deaths. On Monday alone, some 731 New Yorkers died of coronavirus, bringing the death total by our count somewhere around 5,500 in New York State alone. There was some good news, though. Governor Cuomo pointing out that yesterday intubations were down. Intensive care unit admissions also down. Hospitalizations appear to be plateauing as well. So some good news from Governor Cuomo. He insists that the social distancing is working. He insisting also that pressing pause on life as we know it also working. We heard the governor spend perhaps more time than we have in some of these recent briefings talking about restarting life as we know it. Saying that he's been having conversations with Governor Murphy in New Jersey, also the governor of Connecticut as well, because when that happens, when life does return to some semblance of normalcy, it will have to be done in conjunction with New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. Also interesting to hear the governor talk about this antibody testing that's been approved by New York State Health. It has not been approved by the FDA, but Dr. Lippy Roy is the doctor on duty, if you will, with me for the hour. And Dr. Roy, let's start there. Governor Cuomo talking about this antibody testing. I didn't fully understand exactly what they were talking about, but walk us through, if you can, what the governor was talking about and how essential that's going to be to returning to some semblance of normal life.
Hey, Craig, so this is the key point to remember. There's two different types of antibodies that we need to measure. IgM is what's produced when a person becomes acutely infected, right? So that's the body produces that within days after an initial infection. IgM indicates acute infection. IgG is the antibody that takes about a few weeks to produce. And IgG is a reflection of a person already presumably recovered from infection. We don't know that they may be immune, but the reason that information is important and the reason we need to identify people who have IgG is because these are people who potentially are immune to the infection and who could potentially return back to work. We need to have really widespread testing so we can get an accurate sense of the denominator or the scope of the problem in terms of who's acutely ill and who's maybe healthy enough, recovered, and can go back to work and be, so.
The governor also talked about the need for rapid testing and that rapid testing that exists, but it hasn't been brought to scale just yet. Dr. Roy, why is that going to be so essential in returning to, again, some sort of semblance of normal life, that rapid testing?
Yeah, absolutely. So think about the flu test, right? So we have a rapid flu test. You go into the clinic, urgent care, you get swabbed, and you get that result within minutes. We need exactly that kind of technology now. Cases, we're talking about New York, cases are still going up, I believe. Deaths are going up. But look at the rest of the country, right? We are the epicenter here in New York, but we're going to have multiple other hot zones and epicenters. We need these results quickly. In a city like New Orleans, where I evacuated from Hurricane Katrina and came back and took care of a very vulnerable group of people, the test results there are taking somewhere from 3 to 5 days to come back. We can't do that in order to accurately assess the scope of the problem and treat people as quickly as possible. This is an infection where it's affecting people pretty rapidly. So the sooner we can diagnose, the sooner we can treat.
Dr. Roy, stand by for me if you can. just a moment. One of the questions that we just heard asked of Governor Cuomo, it's an angle of the story that we're also covering today, how this virus is disproportionately affecting communities of color, especially. We know now, according to reports, that in Louisiana alone, for instance, 70% of the deaths there, 70% of the coronavirus deaths are people of color. Morgan Radford covering this part of the story for us. Morgan, what else do we know?
We know, Craig, this is effectively a crisis within a crisis. If you actually look at the data, it shows that COVID-19 is essentially a ticking time bomb for communities of color who are being disproportionately impacted, especially when it comes to those severe or even deadly complications. And what's interesting, Craig, is that the CDC doesn't actually share those racial breakdowns of the data, but certain cities and states do, and it's alarming. So if you look, for example, you mentioned Louisiana, 70% of the deaths there are among African Americans. Across the state of Michigan, which is a state that's only 14% black, 40% of those deaths are also among African Americans. When you look at blacks and Latinos in places like Milwaukee County, they account for 78% of the deaths. And right here in New York, if you look at 56% of those deaths are concentrated in Queens or in the Bronx. And as you know, those are both majority minority communities. And so part of the things, as we've spoken to patients, as we've spoken to experts, Craig, they point to three factors: health, jobs, and surprisingly misinformation. Take a listen to what some of the patients we spoke to said.
There was a little bit of like, oh, black people can't get it, right? Well, guess what? Here I am. I got it. It's one thing to hear, hey, stay home, social distance. It's another thing to actually like really have to internalize that. And I feel like that's one of the things that I didn't do a really good job of early on. And I paid the price for it.
So, Craig, when you look at those three factors, when it comes to health, the CDC has said that according to their own data, things like hypertension, diabetes, asthma, they're already overrepresented in communities of colors, and they become deadly when you interact with COVID-19. But secondly, when it comes to jobs, African Americans and Latinos are both overrepresented in service industry jobs that require face-to-face interaction. And then finally, the most surprising thing from our reporting was this notion of misinformation. I don't know if you saw it, but I saw certain memes that were floating around the internet that said things like black people can't get COVID-19. We know that is untrue, but those myths were so prevalent that the CDC had to actually create their own web portal to dispel myths, because we do know that this virus can affect anybody, regardless of race, gender, creed, or color. But we also know that it's not that black or brown people are more susceptible to actually catching the virus itself. It's just that they are overrepresented and more susceptible to having those risky or complicating factors if they should get it. Craig?
All right, Morgan Radford. Morgan, thank you so much for that. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley joins me now, of course, Democrat from Massachusetts. Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time this morning. I understand that you've written a letter along with Senators Booker, Senators Warren, Senator Kamala Harris as well. And you wrote this letter, as I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Tell me more about the letter. Tell me what you and your fellow lawmakers hope to accomplish.
Well, we wrote that letter on March 27th because history has shown us that in the face of combating any virus, that communities of color are disproportionately impacted. We saw that with H1N1. And of course, we know that communities of color represent a more vulnerable group because they also represent many of those underlying conditions that put someone at risk. And so on March 27th, myself, Senator Warren and Harris and Booker, respectively, sent a letter to Health and Human Services asking them to collect data in real time to disaggregate that data. We have not heard a response from them. There are some states that are already doing this, but we need this to be standardized across the board because it will directly inform how we coordinate and marshal resources. And we know that which gets measured gets done. It will give us those assurances that access to testing and treatment is equitable in meeting the scale and scope of this pandemic.
Hey, Congresswoman, I just heard something there in the governor's briefing. There's a question asked about this sort of racial disparity that we're talking about, and the response was basically they're collecting the data from the coroner's office after someone has been, I guess it's been determined that they've died as a result of coronavirus. Do you know if that's the norm nationwide, or is that unique to New York?
Well, again, that's the point. That's why we sent that initial letter March 27th, because we know what history has already shown us and we understood the risk. And today, myself and Representative Robin Kelly of Illinois are leading a letter with the Congressional Black Caucus advocating for our Democratic leadership to make this a priority. We need standardized testing. This has to be a federal mandate. And not only that we have that, not only that we have that data, but that it is being publicly shared. We are already collecting age and gender. And by collecting age and gender and sharing that data, we now see that we see a higher proportionality of men being represented in this, men of color in particular. And so it is important that we begin to collect this data to disaggregate it and to publicly share it in real time. I would also add, given that communities of color disproportionately suffer from those underlying conditions that make them more vulnerable, like asthma and heart disease and diabetes, that is why I also continue to fight for our community health centers, because we know that disproportionately that our most vulnerable communities lack equal access to quality health care. And so in meeting the scale and the scope of this pandemic, we have to continue to fight for those community health centers as well.
Congresswoman, while I have you, I want to talk about phase 4 of this stimulus relief, this relief package that's been talked about by lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Governor Cuomo just basically insisted that to reopen the economy in New York, they're going to need federal assistance. What more would you like to see in a phase 4 of some sort of stimulus bill?
I'm going to end it right there because I have something to talk about pertaining to antibodies that they've just got through recently talking about. I didn't want to get hung up on the financial part of it right now. The financial part, that's a big factor, but right now that ain't what I'm wanting to discuss. I'm wanting to discuss about the antibodies. I'm going to say something that a lot of people are probably going to laugh at. One of those things is that I told my brother David, because I got to noticing my brother David, every time that he would get a real bad cold or something, he would head down to Rutherford to get a booster shot. And after I noticed him doing that 3 or 4 different times, I told David, I said, David, you're messing up, man. He goes, why is that? I go, because your immune system is what fights off bacteria and germs in your body. And whenever you get to the point that you no longer rely upon your immune system, but you're relying upon artificial medications to take over your immune system for you, I said, one of these days, something's going to happen and your immune system isn't going to be able to take over, and then you're going to be in big, big trouble. He just kind of laughed it off and didn't understand that. Back years and years ago, whenever I was just a young child, I remember Aunt Pauline, which was my grandmother, Miss Vera Aldell Jackson. She had another sister over here that was married to McDermott. But anyways, Pauline come down here and got on this cleaning frenzy towards wanting to clean Miss Aldell's house. And I remember that it started a literal ruckus in the family towards her wanting to come down here and get everything spot clean. I didn't recognize until later on throughout the years how come Mom and Dad was so prevalent in not wanting that done. And the fact of the matter is, there is 2 types of dirt in the world. There's a dirty dirt, and then there's a clean dirt. The clean dirt is what actually helps you to build up your immune system to the point that you can fight off various bacteria. You keep in mind that we live in a life, all of us do, with constant germs and constant parasites. And our body is our greatest healer of all, that learns to adapt to these type of things, that can recondition ourselves to the point that we can be exposed to something and then fight it off and go on about our business. The people in New York City basically live in a very, very toxic environment. You keep in mind that there are rats that live in the gutters and lives down in the subway systems. They don't become cats, the size of cats, if they're not eating something that's yummy for them to eat. New York City, I guarantee you could walk in there at any given time of the day during normal procedures, and you could have on brand new sparkling clothes, and by the end of the day you never touching nothing, but because of all the smoke and all the carbon dioxide that comes off the taxis and comes off the buses, at the end of the day you will look absolutely gaudy or crummy pertaining to the way your clothes look, the way your clothes smell, the way your hair looks, the way your hair smells. Your whole body is subjected to this type of toxicity in New York City, because basically all they do is live around concrete, asphalt, a bunch of people, and of course all the smut and the dirt that goes along with it, which is the dirty dirt, not the good dirt, the dirty dirt. So the point that I'm trying to make is this, pertaining to the antibodies. A little bit of dirt in underneath people's fingernails never hurt nobody. A little bit of work never hurt nobody. And these are the factors, the primary factors of the reason why that we're seeing such high numbers in places like New York, is because they have never built up a good antibody system so that their chemical biological makeup won't fight that off pertaining to their immune system. Now, there's different people that live in different areas that have different immune systems. Me, myself, and I have a bad immune system, and I've known this for quite some time, especially since I've recently come down with diabetes. But even before diabetes, I had tonsils removed that helps clean and purify different parts of the blood system. Appendix removed, and I believe my spine was removed. Because of those three factors, automatically puts me in a high risk category, even without the diabetes. You add the diabetes along with the weight, along with my age. Now I become a high risk to the point that I don't need to become exposed to any type of germ or any type of disease out there, because my body is going to have a tough time towards kicking that off, towards resisting that. That's the reason why the scientists and the doctors can't understand how come some people get it and they basically cure right up and they're back on their feet again in 2 weeks' time, and others get it that don't. It's because their immune system has been bled down to the point that they don't have an immune system. And we're talking about people that's never had tonsils, appendix, a spleen removed. We're talking about good people, and the reason why is because the environment towards what they live in and what they have subjected themselves to. So this disease does have limitations in how far that it can go pertaining to victimizing its victims in these resorts. It's nothing more than a high concentrated type of flu that's on steroids that basically attacks the lungs or the internal parts of the body to the point that you basically start drowning in your own fluids. And of course, anybody with asthma or any type of pre-existing breathing problem, somebody that smokes, etc., is once more going to be put on that higher risk that if you get this germ, you're going to be more susceptible in being attacked and not going to be able to get over it. I just wanted to share that about the antibodies, because it's very, very essential that our body is the greatest healer of all, and that we keep up our immune system towards the things we drink, things we're involved in, what we eat, how much we drink, what we drink, etc., etc. It's all a matter of the body taking care of itself, because like I said a while ago, the body is your greatest healer. And if your body can't overcome these things, then you're in trouble. Also, looking at the spiritual sense, the spirit, mind, and body, if you don't have a good spirit that can that can identify these problems with your body, you're automatically going to be at high risk because you don't have the right purified spirit. And it does make a difference in the eyes of not only God, but in the eyes of the body community pertaining to you taking care of yourself, because if you don't have the right spirit, you're not going to have the right mind. If you don't have the right mind, you're not going to have the right body. One thing kind of feeds off each other, to the point that that's why I believe that these people are more susceptible of catching these diseases, and that's the reason why that we have seen the numbers that we have seen in New York City pertaining to people catching the virus and it basically becoming lethal. We need to keep these people in prayer, these people that have low immune systems, including myself, because once you reach the age that, let's say, my pancreas can't take care of all the acids that's within my system towards causing my sugar level to go up, then we have to rely on generic substitutions to be able to do so for us. Once more, we need to remember these people in prayer. Good luck to all of us. And once more, shalom. Thanks for listening.